Today, we're diving into a fascinating master's thesis that tackles one of the biggest health problems out there, clogged arteries. But the solution being explored here isn't what you might expect. We're not talking about a new drug or a different kind of surgery. We're talking about nanotechnology. So I want you to picture a massive traffic jam. Cars are backed up for miles. But this isn't happening on some highway. It's happening inside one of your arteries. Now, what if you could send in a microscopic cleanup crew? An army of tiny helpers to just clear that blockage right up. Well, that's the wild, futuristic idea we're digging into today. All right, first things first. Before we talk about the solution, we've got to understand the problem. We need to get a really clear picture of this biological traffic jam, which in the medical world is known as a stenosed artery.
And here it is. This is the blueprint for our entire problem. The technical term is a stenosed bifurcated artery. Now that's a mouthful, but all it really means is you have a narrowed artery right at a critical fork in the road. It is, the absolute worst place for a blockage to happen. So the villain of our story is called stenosis. It's just the medical term for an abnormal narrowing in any passage in the body. But here, we're talking about a blood vessel. The highway analogy is just perfect. It's like a 3-lane highway, suddenly closing down to 1 lane, forcing everything to squeeze through and causing total chaos. And where this happens is super important. It's at a bifurcation. That's just a fork in the road, where one main artery splits into 2 smaller ones. And it turns out these forks are natural weak points in our circulatory system. The physics of the blood flow right at that split makes it a prime spot for plaque to build up and cause that dangerous narrowing. Okay, so you've got this really dangerous blockage. How in the world do you study it safely? I mean, you can't just start testing experimental treatments on a living person's heart. This is where things get really, really clever. The researchers decided to build a digital copy. And the answer is, you build a digital twin. Think about that. You create a perfectly accurate simulation of the artery right inside a computer. This lets scientists test all kinds of crazy ideas, run thousands of experiments, and see exactly what's happening with the physics of blood flow, all with zero risk to an actual patient. It's brilliant.
So how do they do it? Well, it's a very precise 4-step process. First, you have to draw the exact 2D map of the artery. Then you tell the computer all the mathematical rules of physics for blood flow and heat. Step 3, you create something called a mesh, which breaks that map into thousands of tiny solvable pieces. And finally, you hit go and let some powerful software, in this case COMSOL Multiphysics, do all the heavy number crunching.
And let's zoom in on that mesh for a second, because this is really the secret sauce. You see, the computer isn't looking at the artery as one big thing. It's solving the incredibly complex equations of fluid dynamics inside every single one of these little triangles. The more triangles you have, the more accurate your simulation becomes. Okay, so our digital artery is built and it's ready to go. Now, it's time to bring in our microscopic helpers. This is the secret weapon for this whole investigation, nanoparticles.
What the researchers are actually testing here is something called a nanofluid. You start with a base fluid. For us, that's blood. And then you mix in a whole bunch of tiny nanoparticles. We're talking particles between 1 and 100 nanometers in size. Just for perspective, a single human hair is about 80,000 nanometers thick. So these things are unimaginably small, and adding them can totally change how a fluid behaves.
And in this specific study, the base fluid is blood, and the secret ingredient they're adding is copper nanoparticles. The whole goal is to see if this new superpowered blood can actually improve the situation inside our blocked artery. So how exactly do they help? Well, take a look at this chart. You can see that adding the nanoparticles barely changes the density or the viscosity, how thick the blood is. But look at the top line, thermal conductivity. It's significantly enhanced. What that means is, adding these copper particles makes blood way, way better at transferring heat. And that, right there, could be a total game changer for developing new heat-based medical treatments.
So we've got the digital artery, we've got our nanofluid. Now it's time for the fun part. Let's put it all together and see what happens when we actually run the simulation. This is where all that physics comes to life.
All right, here we go. We are just 2 seconds into the simulation. What we're looking at here is blood velocity, or speed. The color coding is simple. Blue is slow, red is fast. And you can already see the blood starting to speed up as it gets funneled into that narrow opening.
Whoa, okay, now look at this. At the 6-second mark, as the blood is forced through that tiny passage, its speed absolutely skyrockets to a peak of 0.416 meters per second. It's the exact same principle as when you put your thumb over the end of a garden hose. You shrink the opening, and the water shoots out with incredible force.
And then, at 12 seconds, we get to see the aftermath. After being shot through that gap, the blood flow doesn't just calmly go back to normal. No, it becomes chaotic, turbulent, as it spills into those two smaller arteries. And that turbulence can cause a whole new set of problems downstream.
And let's just pause to remember what's at stake here. The author of the thesis, Ibtisam Ahmed, puts it very simply. One of the main factors causing heart stroke is the stenosis in an artery. This isn't just a cool physics experiment. This is research that could one day save lives. And that's the real power of a digital twin. It can track so much more than just speed. The researchers can also visualize things like pressure, and you can see it building up right before the blockage. They can also track temperature, seeing how the flow changes the way heat is distributed. It's like getting a complete physical checkup of the artery, all inside a computer.
So it's one thing to see all these colorful graphs and simulations, but what does it all really mean? Let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture for the future of medicine.
So, what's the bottom line here? Well, we've confirmed that a stenosis creates this really dangerous zone of high speed and high pressure. But more importantly, we've shown that adding nanoparticles can essentially supercharge blood's ability to move heat around. Now, that's not just an interesting fact, it's a key that could unlock entirely new kinds of treatments, everything from targeted drug delivery to new thermal therapies.
Now, let's be really clear about something. This research isn't a cure. Not yet. What it is, though, is a powerful proof of concept. It's a foundational piece of the puzzle that shows us a new and really exciting path forward. It's a glimpse into how nanotechnology might one day give us a whole new set of tools to fight heart disease.
And that really leaves us with one big, fascinating question to think about. We just looked at one very specific example of its potential. But looking ahead, you have to wonder, how is nanotechnology going to fundamentally reshape the way we diagnose and treat the human body over the next decade?